Tonight, I'm planning to spend the night camping in the Lake George Wild Forest, 15 miles from the Bigfoot Capital of New York State. For those who haven't spent much time in the northeastern United States, it may be difficult to imagine that there's much in the way of wilderness in New York. The state, of course, inevitably conjures up images of the city. And it really is the city, the one place that all the world seems to revolve around. And yet, New York really is a large and mostly rural state. Hours north of the city, far from any major metropolitan area, you'll enter the Adirondack Park. One of the earliest of the nation's great parks to be founded, it's also the largest in the contiguous United States. At more than 6 million acres, the Adirondacks are home to more than 10,000 lakes and 30,000 miles of rivers and streams. But perhaps most notably, the park remains one of the most biodiverse regions in the entire United States. To really understand how remote and rugged New York State can get, you need to conceptualize just how sprawling and vast the Adirondacks are. This park is greater in size than Yellowstone, Everglades, Glacier, and Grand Canyon National Park, all combined. Reports of a wild, hairy creature in the woods are certainly not limited to modern times. Early settlers in New York and Vermont recorded encounters with a creature that was said to resemble a huge bear walking on two legs. Reports at the time said that the creature ripped up fences and gardens, chased cows and sheep, dragged trees through cornfields and other crops, threw stones at schoolchildren, and terrified hunters. There are, of course, many other such stories. Suffice it to say, the legends of the wild man of the woods are persistent. Perhaps you might assume that I'm skeptical of the Sasquatch, and that I thus don't believe that there's any risk to camping in prime Bigfoot territory. But that's not it. To be honest, I believe that reality is far stranger than we can ever imagine, and something like Sasquatch very well might exist. Do I expect to get stalked by one while I'm out here in the backcountry in the off-season, miles from any other human? Probably not. But even just the idea makes for a far more interesting experience. And that, ultimately, is the entire reason that I heft a 50-pound bag onto my back and trudge out into the woods, wandering alone for miles and miles. Because it is, in the end, simply for that feeling of adventure.
Oops.
But the most famous Bigfoot encounter in New York State occurred not all that long ago, near the town of Whitehall, New York. The events began on August 24th, 1976. Teenagers Martin Paddock, Paul Goslin, and Bart Kinney were driving down a road just outside of town. They saw a large human form standing near a field just off the road. Goslin recalled the incident like this. It was about 10 p.m. when Marty and I saw a large human form standing on the side of the road. We stopped and heard a sound like a pig squealing or a lady screaming. We drove off to the top of the hill, locked the doors on the truck, loaded the gun, and pointed it out the window. When the men spotted the creature again, the odd figure was standing about 70 feet away, only dimly visible. Then, abruptly, it began running toward them. At first, Goslin couldn't speak. When he finally found the words to cry out, all he could manage was, most in town were unwilling to believe the three teenagers. Most, that is, except for Goslin's father. Wilfred Goslin recalled hearing an eerie screaming in the area the previous year. Curious, he rounded up a few other men and immediately set off for the scene of the encounter. To their great shock, the creature was still there. Wilfred Goslin stated, "It scared me. It scared me a lot. What really attracted me was the eyes on it. Big red eyes. It just stood there." Two more police officers would also encounter the frightening creature the very next night. My headlights picked up a pair of eyeballs. Big red eyeballs, and I turned the lights of the car off. I shined my flashlight out there, and that's when I saw the thing look right at me. All it did was stand there. It put its hands in front of its eyes. Hands? I don't know if that's what they were. I couldn't see any fingers. All it did was scream at the top of its lungs. I watched him for a good minute. Then he turned around and started back into the woods. The creature, according to the officers involved in this encounter, was almost 8 feet tall, had large red eyes, and walked upright, like a human. Dozens more sightings occurred over the following years. While encounters with the creature have diminished significantly since the 1970s and are now rare, the beast remains a significant presence in town. Even on the best and brightest days, the sounds of the forest can quickly begin to feel uncanny. Deep in the woods, our normal, everyday reality sometimes feels thinner, distant. Human brains are wired for pareidolia, our tendency to spot patterns in chaos. It can be surprisingly difficult at these times to orient yourself to what's right in front of you. Humans are wired to see danger lurking in the shadows, after all. Better to mistake a tree stump for a monster than to mistake a monster for a tree stump. The most recent sighting of the beast occurred in 2018, late in the summer. Most sightings, according to local researcher Paul Bartholomew, occur in the autumn. He suspects that the creature may follow a seasonal migratory route through the region. I had been planning on getting a nice big campfire going for the night. If I'm being honest, the idea offered a great deal of comfort while I was planning this trip. Knowing the legends surrounding the woods near Whitehall, I'll admit that I was a little spooked and almost changed my plans at the last minute. It's easy to feel unnerved at night in the autumn, even for someone who spends as much time in the woods as I do. There's a primal fear of the dark that's just not very easy to shake. It became clear that there would be no campfire tonight. It's been a cold, wet year here in New York. And with constant rain these last few weeks, all the branches I could find were far too damp for a fire. I would have to spend the cold night with only the light that I brought with me. What is it about the dark that draws us in? What is it about fear that we find strangely enticing, addicting even? This seems more and more clear today, and an ever more pertinent question. Why do we often seem drawn to anxiety rather than relaxation? When confronted with some dark unknown, why do we find it so hard to look away? What is it that we humans are wired for? Mere curiosity? Or some drive even stronger than that? think about this often every time I head out into the mountains, every time I spend a night surrounded by a pool of inky darkness. Is this merely what it means to be human? To refuse to accept the way things are? To charge headlong forward into whatever strange, dark fate may lay ahead? I suspect that reality simply gets stranger and stranger the closer, the deeper we look, which makes it tempting to look away, and we often do. We want to tell ourselves, no, no, we've already mapped it all out, and thus we can clearly see on this map that there's nothing strange out there, nothing unknown. But this sort of attitude never lasts for long. The universe is webbed with tricksters, spirits of mischief, simply waiting to taunt and topple our inflated egos. When asked what we're sure, with absolute certainty, to be true, the only honest answer, in most cases, is this: I don't know.
Is Sasquatch real? Could Bigfoot really still be out there, undiscovered? Perhaps. And if that really is the case, the mystery would still remain far from solved. If Sasquatch is real, then a new mystery emerges. What is it?
Is Sasquatch a lost ancestor of humans? Is it a nature spirit? Is it somehow related to the UFO phenomenon, as is strangely often reported? I don't know. We don't know what all remains hidden out there, beyond the veil of darkness. But it sure is fun trying to find out.
I may not have managed to find Sasquatch on this trek, but I'm guessing you probably didn't spot the funny creature that I did find, in the dark, by the fire pit. If you missed it, stick around for a moment and I'll show you a highlight from nature's blooper reel. And if you enjoyed this video and want to help me continue on this quest, please gently apply pressure to the like button and subscribe to see more of my adventures. If you'd like to spend more time wandering the woods yourself, whether searching for a Sasquatch or simply searching for a good view, please consider checking out one of my hiking guides. Links are in the description below. They're packed full of advice, guidance, inspiration, as well as my landscape photography from all across the country.